So I'll kick us off. Hello and welcome to the Product Analytics PM UX biweekly. It's for the 30th of November. Sam, well, since we don't have any action items, I think we can skip that agenda item. Sam, you have the next one.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about our left sidebar discussion again. We kind of put this on the back burner for the last few weeks, but I feel like since we've been making more progress recently, it's time to get to a decision point in what we're going to do here. The open question we had previously was deciding how many and what screens we wanted for product analytics, because that would dictate whether we needed to do something different with the left sidebar versus do like a tabular approach or something else. So I was wanting to discuss today, do we know what all the screens we're going to need for both the internal preview and have some idea on the customer preview are going to be? That way we can make a decision on what the first iteration of our left sidebar experience will look like. I listed the 4 that I can think of in the bullets, being the dashboard screen, the instrumentation screen, query designer, and cluster configuration. Not sure if there's others I'm missing though.
I mean, those are the 4 that I can think of off the top of my head as well. But I mean, I would say we should probably do a little bit of like an information architecture exercise to really make sure that we have that all mapped out. But at the same time, it's 4 to start, and we'll only expand from there, right? So, you know, we can go with the tabular approach, but that seems like kind of like a short-term solution that will confuse. Well, especially when we get out to users, that will only confuse it further, I guess.
Sure.
My recollection of this is like we were trying to like consider like if other groups could rename their sections or their menu groups so that we could have our own. Well, what's the current state of that? I suppose that's what I'm trying to ask.
So I had some conversations on Slack, and it seems like this is going to be one of those coordination exercises that's going to take a lot of time just to get people on the same page if we want to do a big rearrangement. Which is fine, we can do that, but I want to separate, you know, here's the big project we have to do versus we need to have something in the left sidebar so you can actually get to what we have. I don't think there's necessarily opposition in principle to what we want to do in terms of splitting things out. It's just going to be a large coordination effort that I'm expecting to be pretty time consuming. The latest is in the thread on the issue as well. If you want to go read through that, there's been some discussion in the last week or so there.
Yeah, the only other page I could think of that or screen I don't know if we'd end up having it as a item would be the instrumentation settings. And I hope I'm no longer robotic, because Dennis pointed out I was robotic. That's all right. It's the instrumentation settings where we list out how to get instrumentation going on your product. Right now, we're planning on having that as a page which gets linked through a button in the main header on the dashboards listing, but at some point we may want to keep that but move it into a left-hand menu item as well. So that's the only other page I can think of in terms of additional pages.
Yeah, I think Sam has called that out as part of the 4.
Initially. Oh, sorry, I was reading the top bullet point, not the next bullet point. I'm going to shut up now.
No, you're fine. I guess. Sorry, I wish I should have read the issue, but I don't know. Just I'll. It just seems like there's a lot of stuff in the analytics menu group right now that needs to go into its own areas. Like CI/CD can go into this. We literally have a menu group for CI/CD. Insights can probably go to like the overview or like the top level, like the first menu group item. I don't remember what it's called right now. Like it seems, my gut feeling is like we're gonna need our own menu group, because we don't have a sub menu concept, and I don't think a usability purposes it's going to be a great experience anyways. So yeah, I guess once we have that list of screens, like what are our next steps? Because I don't know if it makes sense for us to just like be like, hey, we need to do that coordinated effort, just spread everything out and just introduce a product analytics menu group at this point, which I think we already have, right? Don't we already have that?
No left-hand menu item.
Okay.
No.
Okay,
No, so once we have the list of screens, and we can take some time if we want to think about this list of 4, if there's any others we'll need, is to re-engage with some of the UX folks on that issue, because the feedback was this is a little too nebulous to be actionable right now, because it's currently formed in terms of, we're going to have several screens, but it's not an explicit list of we need X, Y, and Z to be added. So the discussion needs to be a little more tangible. Once we have that, we can start having that more tangible discussion. In terms of that next step, I was going to plan to re-engage with the people on this issue about that specific topic. And Dennis, to your point, I do agree that we're likely going to need our own left sidebar option with more of these screens. I'm thinking through how we can approach this iteratively, though, so that we're not going to block our whole capability release on the outcome of this discussion, because I'm expecting this will probably be a few months, especially longer with the holidays and everything coming up, versus we need to have something in the left sidebar, even if it's not ideal, so people can get access to what we're doing, if that makes sense.
Yes. I guess that just happens in the SDK. Sorry, I'm just trying to like throw out what's probably going to be coming at some point. So
the
like
quickest. Go on, Dennis. Sorry.
No, sorry, just go for it. I'm typing stuff out.
Okay, I was going to say, the quickest and simplest thing for us to be able to do would be to just chuck ourselves in the underneath the analytics menu item. It's definitely not ideal, and I would say from a user experience point of view, super confusing. But at least it's under an analytics heading of some description. Because if we can't, the only other way would be to get that left-hand menu item up. But from what I can tell, there's a lot of pushback because they're already doing research around that left-hand menu item, and they've already made they've taken into account the current analytics section, and maybe they don't want to add to their existing research by having to add that whole new section and do comparison research around whether that's confusing or not to users. So if it's going to be difficult to get that left-hand menu sorted, then that's literally the only place I could think of putting it, or under the product. Sorry, under the product menu item, the sub-menu within product when you open up a new product item. Project, words.
A new submenu when you open up the project.
Sorry, not a new submenu. When you're in a project, under project information, you could have it if you wanted, because it is relatable to that in some way. Repository, probably a no-go. Issues, no-go. So I mean, you've either gone analytics or the project information tab. That's the only two I can think of.
Of the two, I think analytics would make more sense.
Yeah. Okay. So I just added what I think is probably coming up in the next possible year. Like, I don't think fitting under an existing menu group makes sense. I get that UX research that compounds their work, but I feel like we also complicate that confusion for users by inserting ourselves into project or analytics. I would rather, and our timing for customer facing stuff is still undetermined. So I would rather we try to push forward with, hey, we're going to have a product analytics menu group.
Also, goal is not this quarter, but next quarter to have something for first customer facing, right?
Right. So like we have time, is I guess more or less what I'm trying to say. At the same time, we've already got 8, and then eventually more. Like we look at pricing, like we've got data debugging, A/B testing, cohorts, and messaging. Like there's going to be a lot more. So I think the right thing to do is just to keep pushing forward with like getting our own menu group item, and then coordinating the efforts to separate the analytics thing. That's my feeling on it. Because I feel like if we go, my final thought on that is like, if we go under analytics and then we go customer facing and we're like, hey, check this out, and then all of a sudden we disappear and like, where do our features get access now? I would rather avoid that. Sorry, Jan, go for it.
No, I just wanted to add a big +1. I mean, it makes sense. We're going to be behind a feature flag. Like if it's not enabled, no one's going to see it. It's going to be an offer feature flag that we're telling customers not to enable. So the cost is pretty low. You know, it's a cheap like thing to do if we need to change it going forward. So it gives us that time to deliberate, and we can get something out there that you can actually click. Because right now, like you need a URL or like bookmark every single time.
Okay, so you all think we should go with the coordination effort to put something at the top of the left sidebar to start, then not do the smaller option for now and iterate on top of it then?
I would say so. I get that it's going under analytics is more of the boring solution. Maybe, I don't know. I wouldn't even agree with that. It is the one of least effort, but it's just like, this has always been a sticking point in terms of UX debt, and we're just only adding to it. And I don't see us until we do. I don't know. It just seems like one of those things we have to do to get us out of this problem. Otherwise, we're going to keep talking about this for like the next few years with all these other groups, and then they're going to add their own features on top of it, and it's just going to get worse. Like I don't think it's the right thing to do. I don't think it's the most iterative thing, but I think we can iterate towards it. But
so yeah, what do we do for? Yeah, okay, no, that makes sense. So what do we do for the internal preview then in terms of left sidebar? Like what do we do until we get that broader agreement?
Add that menu group item. It's under a feature flag anyways, and no one's going to see it except for us.
I don't think we can. The whole code base of that side is owned by Foundations. So when we add that as a code, we're going to require approval from a member of the Foundations team. So it's not like we can sneak this in. So I'd rather be a lot more
sneak it in.
But we
can just be upfront that it's behind the feature flag and it's subject to change.
Well, that's what I was going to suggest, is in this left sidebar organization discussion, we say, right, these are the screens we're expecting to have over the next year.
Yeah.
Some of these are a lot more quicker than others. But in the meantime, we strongly suggest that we get this left sidebar option is going to be behind a default feature flag off. We're not going to be recommending it to anyone for many months to come, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, I agree. It is going under analytics is the path of least resistance. We're going to get less pushback by doing it that way. But I agree with everyone else's points that it is probably the least ideal way of doing it. If we can get the left sidebar in, I'm more for that, especially from a user experience point of view. It just makes more sense.
Yeah, and okay. So I would love to better understand the process to discuss this with Foundations. I don't know if there have already been any discussions about this, so pardon my ignorance for that, but like I'm happy to help participate in that conversation.
Sure. Well, so I appreciate all the viewpoints, and so where we can go from here then, because like I said, the issue kind of stalled out because we didn't have like an explicit, this is what we're planning to do and asking for help and feedback on. If we have any other ideas for what will be needed from a screen perspective, let's try and get those added in the next week or so, so that we can put a timeline on this, as well as a proposal on how did those screens, where did they live, either on this left sidebar option, a settings page, whatever. Basically, so we have a proposal to review with Foundations. Where we can go from there then is engage with the broader Foundations group, the people on that issue, so that we can start refining it to a place where they're comfortable, approving it once we implement it, and actually getting it merged in. How does that sound, folks?
Yeah, that makes sense. What are you thinking in terms of timeline?
Could we have a goal to fill out the list of screens we'll need, as well as a proposed hierarchy for them by the next iteration of this meeting?
This is weekly, yeah?
Correct.
Okay.
Did you want that put in like a Figma file, like, or some kind of visual way for everyone to be able to see what this menu item would look like in situ?
Yeah, that'd be great if you could put that together. If that is a big lift, since we're talking about menu hierarchy, it could also be a bullet with sub bullets to represent menu.
Can we keep it simple maybe and just use a list like what we have here, and then just break it up if we need to. I don't know if we need to go into Figma for this. It's
Fair
just
enough.
how we expect to represent it in the menu is, which is effectively just 2 levels of list items, right? So, and I can see these eventually breaking up into their own categories as well, but that's a different conversation. And I'll why don't we move this into an issue as well? So I'll create one right now.
Yeah, let's do it in one, not the left sidebar discussion issue that everyone's already in as well.
No, I'm just going to call it information architecture, and I'll log it here.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
I can kind of see how someone from the outside might see all these bullet points and be like, why are we adding so many screens? When I think what we're planning on doing is condensing a few of those into tabs, right? We
don't know yet, and we got to talk about it.
But I think that's worth noting. Just saying like, hey, like not all of these may necessarily be like menu items.
I mean, that's a very it's a very subjective conversation to have, because you could argue that all of these could live in one menu item, and then these could all be tabs, right? But I would agree. Like,
we are wearing our UX
hats
at this meeting, so we're making those subjective calls in this.
Right, but what I'm saying is, like, if we say some of these could be tab items, that opens up the door of like, well, why don't you just have product analytics as a menu item, and then everything's in there?
Yeah, what I'm more like getting at is, I wonder if foundations, it wouldn't be easier sell if we gave them the pages that we know we're going to add, like, for sure. So if we gave them like a list of 3 or 4, then it looks, I guess, more like they would maybe be more comfortable if we're more comfortable with what we're suggesting, if that makes sense. Like, we'll give confidence.
I guess I would rather manage expectations such that we would have a little bit more breathing room to add, because like it feels like we're boxing ourselves in. We haven't even released anything to customers, right? So like we get budget from sorry, that sounds weird, petty. But like, okay, we get budget for like 4 page items in the menu. Okay. And then now we want to add a new feature, and we're like, what do we do? Like, I just don't feel like that's a good state to be in. And so I agree, like I think experimentation, like A/B testing, those will probably exist in their own like menu item. But at least right now, I just want to kind of list a bunch of stuff that could potentially be their own page items, or their own menu items, so that like, I don't know. It's just saying, like, I guess, overestimating how much we can have, so that we don't feel as boxed in when we do have other features that should exist on their own, if that makes sense.
The argument, the reason we want these lists is to show that we need a left side menu item, not necessarily that the what goes into the left hand side menu item matters necessarily. We just need to prove that we will need sub pages to go on here. And I kind of get where they're coming from in terms of the menu. One of the biggest complaints we've had at GitLab from a UI source score perspective is just complexity and, navigation being difficult and things not bidding in places people expect them to be. So having this gatekeeping around that left-hand menu makes sense from a historical perspective, to try and help, 1, stop more of that happening, and 2, work towards reducing that over time. So I don't see us having any difficulty once we've listed everything out, but I can see why they really want this described to them.
Yeah, I get it. And at the same time, we want to simplify it, but we are quite literally adding a whole host of different features to the product that don't yet exist. So I feel like in our case, it makes sense for us to exist more than just as a small menu item. And yeah, we could iterate from there, but we're gonna come back if we go into analytics. We will come back to this conversation in a few milestones. So it's kind of just kicking the can down the road. So I'd rather us just call it out now while we have time. We're not in front of customers. And yeah, be as transparent as possible. Say it's behind a feature flag, but yeah, definitely no sense.
One ask I would have on the list as well is adding links to all the epics that each of these would be relevant to, because that'll also make it clear, like, here's what we're planning, here's where the plan is if you want to go read more about it, just to make sure that everyone has visibility on that.
Yeah.
Right, cool. Well, we've spent most of the meeting on this topic already, so I think we can probably do more discussion on this async and have our action item to be to check in on this next week and have a draft put together before we engage with foundations. How's that sound, everyone? Good. Cool. So I wanted to talk about another topic about widgets and new visualizations for the future. We have a lot of different widgets available to us from eCharts, and not all of those are going to be useful to us, but many of them will be. I wanted to start talking from a UX perspective and a requirements perspective. What do we need to have put together before we pass that over to engineering, either for breakdown or implementation? Is that generally a large lift? I just wanted to talk about this in a little bit more, get a little more detail.
I feel like our limitation isn't going to be eCharts. It's going to be what we've defined already in the blah 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 words English, the GitLab. Sorry, throat. In GitLab already in our library of different
GitLab
charts.
UI.
Thank you. Which we've currently got area bar, column, scatter, gauge or gorge, I don't know, heat maps, line chart, obviously single stat and spark line, and stacked column. Those are the ones I can think of. I don't think there's any others. So rather than the full library of the eCharts, if we want to go down and start implementing those, then we need to go through the GitLab UI first. So we've first got to create those in GitLab UI to then come up with a common design language for that chart that makes sense from a user UX perspective, from an accessibility perspective, et cetera, that lines up with the rest of the charts and their designs, to then actually make use of it as a widget visualization.
Got it. When you say GitLab UI, you're talking about pajamas charting?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, GitLab UI from a engineering perspective, but yeah, you've got the same equivalent pages in pajamas as well from a UX point of view. There's a one-to-one relationship, more or less.
Got it. If there is something that's not in pajamas, is that a big effort generally to get something net new in?
From what I've seen, not necessarily, if it's not like deviating from existing patterns. But it is going to require a broader consensus, as it were, to actually get it in, get more than just one or two reviewers' approval. You'll need a bit more of a wider approval. There's a few more steps from what I know, from what I remember. But I could dig into that more if we need to.
Okay, cool. Okay, yeah, no, that's helpful. I'll do some more digging around in this link that you shared, Jan. Thanks for sharing that. Because definitely we're going to have a couple of useful visualization options at first, but there's lots of visualization options that people like. And we're going to get requests for, well, I want to visualize my data with this type of visualization. I know Dennis loves gauges, so I'm happy to see that's already in pajamas. And I added a link to an epic where I'm going to start adding some issues for future visualizations. I might tag you all on those as I make some progress there.
I just took a quick look, and this is a very uneducated opinion, but it looks like a lot of the pajamas designs are pretty much just taken straight from eCharts. So it's more like we have a curated list of charts that we give the thumbs up for, but it's not like we need to redesign anything or restyle it much.
We effectively just wrap it, Sam. So like if you see something in eCharts that isn't in pajamas, which Jan has linked to, then like it's fairly straightforward to just wrap it and say, hey, we just pass through data in the ways that we use it through Vue.
The stumbling block is around the accessibility from a color point of view, especially when you've got multiple like series, accounting for the accessible colors for blind people, etc. And other things like that. So yes, we do more or less wrap, but we then have to go through a process of accessibility review to then get that chart in. So from an engineering point of view, it's not that complicated necessarily. We've got pulling examples from a UX point of view. It again, not that complicated. We just got to make sure we do that due process properly.
Right. So that's something so like Sam's been working on an issue template for creating these widgets. And so I think part of the process and getting it through the GitLab UI or the pajamas review is we'll have to note that accessibility color palette. That said, given that we already have visualizations in the pajamas library, do we already have a palette defined that we can evaluate new visualizations against so that we make sure that they're already using that? Does that make sense?
I think yes, but I need to find it.
Okay. Because then we can just incorporate that into this part of like the visualization, like this addition process. Like
meets all the pajamas guidelines and
requirements
there.
Does this exist in GitLab? Does this exist in pajamas? If yes, or if not, like does it use the accessibility color palette?
We've got our whole color palette in Figma. There's a link to it in the pajamas data visualizations charts at the bottom of the page to the link that Jan shared, which opens up to Figma. And then there's a whole color section which breaks down all the color palette that we can use and how that works in dark and light mode, etc., and sequencing.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, because it'll be great if we can just pick up what we've already done in pajamas. And looking at this, I mean, it seems like most of the ones I had my eye on are already here with the exception of bubble charts and Sankey diagrams. But those are definitely not P1s compared to some of the other things that are here, which we can do first.
The only other thing I can think of is we might get pushback to explain why we need that visualization. Because I can see the case where we start having too many visualizations that we're supporting, if that makes sense, and it gets very confusing. So we should have a genuine reason why a specific set of data works best from a understanding perspective. When someone looks at that data, why is it easier to understand in this way than using something we already have? If that makes sense.
For sure. That's one of the areas in the requirements that I'm going to make sure is there for every visualization, because if we can't articulate why we're using a visualization other than it looks pretty, we shouldn't be using that visualization.
Because why is gauges
people
there?
love to make complicated visualizations that look great but aren't actually that informative or communicate effectively. Bar charts are great even if they're boring.
Obviously, gauges are the best.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, I completely agree. It should make perfect sense and you should justify it. And why is gauges in the pajamas library?
So gauges specifically are great when there's a target value you need to hit and you want to see progress against it. And you like seeing circles versus flat lines.
No. We talked about this yesterday. Simple bar chart can accomplish the same thing.
I think gauges might be one of those we're gonna have to remember we're not the customer in all cases, and certain personas love gauges.
Yeah, but that's fair.
And that's how they choose to visualize it.
To your point, I actually want to.
Won't work with a single stat. If you've got a single stat with a high-low value, then that's where gauges come into the benefit from a visual perspective.
I didn't have a bar chart in my car.
I can challenge that. But yeah, yeah, but for the okay.
You don't own a Tesla.
Yeah, also it just shows a number, and most show a number now.
Tesla shaming, Rob.
Oh no, I have a 63 reg Safira people carrier. It's
So eCharts does have this. So this could be our analytics dashboard. You could have Mao in the center here. You could have DAO over here. you could have, I don't know, maybe server load up here, memory
I don't know.
over
Bye.
here.
I vote that we take. Oh, Dennis disappeared. But I was about to say, I vote that we take a screenshot of his Ducati's instrument cluster and we just duplicate that.
I agree with your point there, Rob. And for the purposes of Sankey diagrams, we'll probably be using that or trying to demo that with funnel analysis. And so we'll have some type of like proof of concept to show like why this is useful. But yeah, please don't car dashboards.
All right. Well, we are over time, but I think I'm good on my 2 topics. Anything else we should go through before we break? All right, I think we're good. We'll talk soon, everyone.